So here we go. Right, this is weird for me, but this is the first time I've ever done any streaming whatsoever, and this is coming from home on an evening where there's going to be all the kind of interruptions that you would expect, from two little dogs running around to cups of tea that need to be made, all the usual stuff that you get. Um, what I'm hoping to do over the next 9 months is I'm going to be making a classic point and click adventure game. And hopefully uh, getting better at all of this kind of streaming lark as well. It's not something I've ever really had much experience of before. I've had quite a bit of experience making games in the past. I've got a few that are out there and playable. One called Polycity Stories, which is in early access on Steam, and something I made years ago called Something Foul Afoot that's on itch.io. I was also responsible for the demo project for Visionaire Studio about 7 or 8 years ago, and there's a load of Visionaire Studio tutorial files and videos that are on my YouTube channel at Andy Liddell. The hope is that each of these live streams, when I can do them in my spare time, will go into a specific part of the game making process, whether that's writing story, writing character dialogue, doing art, doing animation, coding, or just testing and trying to work out bugs. All the kind of warts and all of what it's like to be a part-time solo indie developer working on a passion project like this. So tonight, the first night, I'm going to kick off with basically learning some new stuff. It's not going to be hugely exciting unless you're really into this. But part of that is learning how to stream with OBS Studio. Got that set up today. And that for me is part of this process. I've done this quite a lot of times, and the streaming bit is something totally new. So it's great to learn new things. One of the other things I'm going to be doing that's really new for me is I'm going to attempt to make this point and click game using pixel art, and it's been at least 25 years since I drew any pixel art, and that was probably back in the, or maybe even 30 years ago, back in the days of the Amiga and programs like Deluxe Paint, where that was the only type of art that you could make, really. But it's been a very long time since I've done that. So last week, prior to starting this whole journey off, I started learning Sprite, which is something that those people who are into pixel art have probably heard of before. Those who haven't, I literally bought it a week and a half ago and have started using it, and it seems fantastic. But I am getting to grips with a totally different way of producing art for games. My previous experience was with things like Adobe Flash using vectors, but I really want to come out of the end of this process with a kind of classic retro style point and click adventure game, the kind of things that LucasArts and Sierra made, things like Monkey Island 2, the original Sam and Max, Dave the Tentacle, Full Throttle, these games that I've kind of passionately loved for years since I was really young. So I'm hoping to come out the end of this with something that has a look and feel of those kind of games. So if that's interesting to you, or you're as old as I am, or you're into retro gaming, then hopefully you'll be along for the ride and you'll see just how much effort, time it takes not to just make a game of any type, but to make a game with pixel art in it. So that's all going to be new for me as well. But that's part of the journey, learning something brand new, challenging yourself, doing something you've not done before. So my hope is that people will come along for the ride. If nobody at all joins, watches, follows, or even watches back some of these videos on my YouTube channel, then there'll be nothing lost for me. I think this will also be a really nice archive of the whole creation process of a game end to end, which will be really good for me to look back on in a year or so's time when hopefully this is finished. And hopefully it might be useful to some other budding indie developers out there. Certainly the Visionaire Studio tutorials that I produced years ago have been watched by thousands and thousands of people, and I had some brilliant feedback at the time from the whole community who've used them. So fingers crossed this ends up being useful for somebody. I think most evenings that I'll be streaming, I'll be sat here by myself listening to some tunes and just cracking on with the game. But if people do drop in, I've got chat streams running. By all means, put some messages in the chat if you've got questions about what it is that I'm fiddling with. I'll do my very best to answer them. It might well be that I'm just struggling through weird problems that I don't know how to fix, but frankly, that is about 50% of game development. So without further ado, I'm just going to crack on with it. I'll be sharing different bits of the screen when I'm doing different things, but most of the time I'll just be popping it in that view, I think, where you'll be able to see the whole window of what I'm working on. And in this case, I'm working in Unity tonight, using Adventure Creator, a plugin for Unity, which I've used lots and lots of times, but I have never used it for low resolution pixel art. So tonight's job is working out how to get pixel perfect cameras set up in Unity, and to learn a little bit about the excellent upgrades and updates that have been done to Adventure Creator since I last used it. I'm working on another game in parallel with this, but typically, like most indie devs, you start one project, get halfway through it, and then start another one. This is why this one, importantly, we're keeping the scope really, really small. I was lucky enough to have a nice holiday away a week ago in France with some friends and my wife, and it was a nice relaxing holiday where I got to sit in the sun and had come up with this very silly idea for a point and click adventure game based in a carpet shop, kind of based on a carpet salesman that me and my wife met once when we were buying the flooring for this house. And his character and the guy who worked in the carpet shop were just a bit of a silly inspiration for something that I thought would really carry the humour of those classic point and click adventure games. So I'm going to show up, I'm going to crack on doing some of this, and by all means, if anyone comes along, I will be chatting away. And if you're watching this back at some other point, then hopefully join me on a later one when I might not just be spending hours trying to sort problems in Unity. Okay. So one of the things that I'm trying to do at the moment is understand the resolution that I need to be producing things at. As I said in that little intro, I have been using Sprite. It's a package entirely devoted, I suppose, to pixel art, and I've started to flesh out this particular scene that's got a few different assets in it, which is just going to be the main shop scene that the game kind of starts in, and that it's like based in for the first act. So I've literally been learning this piece of software for a week, and kind of getting used to drawing in this kind of pixel art style again, without any of the tools I'm normally used to, which has been actually quite refreshing. It takes an awful long time, but it is really quite cool. I won't toggle on the characters yet. I haven't finished drawing this scene, but you can see this is kind of individual pixel drawn. There's some great tools, fills and gradients and little dithering things that have been really helpful for this. But I'm really trying to kind of evoke that that old kind of Sam and Max and LucasArts style, with kind of dark vignette foreground items with little bits of lit shading on the corners of them, really going for that kind of pixel theme, with items that come in front of the characters, and then items like this sample, a carpet sample desk that they'll be able to walk around. So I'm aware of how to set all that kind of thing up in Adventure Creator inside Unity. But what I'm not totally sure of, and this is part of the learning process, is it took me quite a lot of searching to work out the best pixel resolution to produce this stuff in so that it still retains that retro feel, but then getting Unity to make sure that it isn't going to filter that when it's scaled up to play on a regular kind of HD monitor. Producing these particular scenes at 320 by 180 pixels, which on a HD monitor is tiny. It's like a little postage stamp like that. So we just need to be sure, and I need to kind of get this sorted out right at the start before we make a really bad mistake and make an awful lot of artwork in the wrong resolution. We want to make sure that it still has got that kind of blocky style and it doesn't get smoothed out when it gets scaled up. And just from some investigation earlier into the way that the sprites are being brought into Unity, big part of that is just turning off all the filtering on these sprites. You'll see the difference actually if I just zoom into this a little bit in this window. So this background sprite that is the shop floor backplate before you lay all the other things on top of it. That's got no filtering on it at the moment, which is keeping this retro kind of blocky pixelated feel. If I put the default on, which is usually bilinear filtering, just re-import that, you'll see it all blurs, and that's not what we want. It's kind of how you'd normally handle sprites to make sure they looked nice and smooth when they were really high resolution, but we want to retain that low resolution feel, even though it's probably going to be played on someone's monitor that is at least HD, possibly even 4K. So I did a bit of reading on the mathematics of it, and it seems like the advice on Reddit and other people who've done this kind of thing before is to turn all the filtering off and to make sure that the artwork you're creating is completely divisible by the same pixels as 4K, HD, and all of the really common sizes. And after scouring some of the Reddit forums on pixel art for quite a while actually, that seems to be 320 by 180 seems to be the most popular size there. So the next step, I just need to check that audio is actually coming through YouTube, because I can see all the audio going, but I'm not entirely sure YouTube is broadcasting it. It is. Fantastic. We're learning as we go. We've got YouTube streaming separately, and then I can hear my dulcet tones coming out my phone. Excellent. Right, so I'll get back to this. The thought process at the moment that I'm trying to work out is I'm using Adventure Creator, as I mentioned. It comes with a demo scene for the 2D engine, which if I just hide a couple of things. If any of you used Adventure Creator before, this is the new 2D demo scene that Chris, who makes Adventure Creator, provides for everyone to learn the basics of setting up a 2D point and click adventure. So this, as always, when I return to Adventure Creator after not having touched it for a good 3 months, it's kind of remembering how everything works, and he's put some incredible new updates in that are supporting some of the things that have come with Unity 6. So I've upgraded Unity to Unity 6.2. I upgraded Adventure Creator to I think 1.8 point something or other. What are we on? We might as well have a look at that actually. About we got Adventure Creator, so we're on 1.84.3 actually. And there's some fantastic new things. The new game wizard here to set up a 2D scene. But recommend this to everybody. If you can afford Adventure Creator, it is by far the best way to make this type of adventure game. And I've tried a lot of different things over the years, and it really is my preferred route. That's largely because I've used Unity for many years, and whilst Visionaire Studio was fantastic while I was using it, there are so many other parts of Unity that are really, really helpful when it comes to debugging this stuff once your game gets really big. So what I'm doing at the moment is taking Chris's scene that he ships with the plugin, remembering how certain things work, and the struggle at the moment, because it is always a struggle to begin with, is just trying to find the camera settings to make sure that when I actually click play in Unity and we get a version of what the game will look like, that we're focused on the right bit of the screen. And as you can see here, that is not the case at the moment. So and this is actually Chris's character, that you'll see is walking into all the wrong things at the moment. I'm just butchering the demo scene to remind myself how it works. Hence, I've renamed this scene Adventure Creator Butchered Demo, whilst I try and work out what camera settings I need to have. When the screen goes green by like this, by the way, this is play mode in Unity. I shade it green. You can choose it in the options somewhere, because over the years I have learnt the hard way. When Unity is in play mode, any changes you make to anything, like grabbing the game cameras here, so this game camera is the one that's being used. When I move the game camera, which is what I'm going to be needing to do in a minute to try and find what settings I need to get this nicely aligned in the play screen. Any of these settings that you change whilst you're in play mode, you'll see I've changed it to 7.8 there, the projection size. If I click stop, it gets rid of everything, all the changes you made while you were in play mode. So you've got to be really careful of that, hence why I've set it up so that it goes bright green and reminds me that things are not going to save while I'm fiddling with them. But it is sometimes the best way to dial stuff in while it's in play mode. What I don't want to do, to be totally honest, is have this might just be me, but I don't want to have like some kind of bizarre number like 5.44, meaning that I'm seeing exactly what I want to see of my scene. I want this to be consistent through all the scenes, so I'm not having to dial in some strange numbers or fix a load of cameras to a particular size. So a combination of the fact that I really want that just to be at its default size, and for it to work. What I don't also want to do here is these all these sprites that I've brought in that are all the independent bits of it. You'll see if I turn some of these off. There's the back plate. There's then the foreground stuff that you saw in a sprite. And these are all separate items if I move them about in Unity, so that you can see it's like a masked off foreground that's going to sit in front of it, because they all need to be on separate layers so the characters walk behind them. The samples desk that is now not showing, and I think that's just because I'm not quite sure why that is. It's set to a layer order that should mean it's showing. How strange. Oh, there we go. It just wasn't showing. That's fine, because I had it hidden. So all of these individual bits are in separate chunks, so characters can move behind them. But I want to be able to just drop the back plate in at that 320 by 180 resolution, have it upscale without it going blurry, but also have some settings that I don't have to change in each scene. I just want to be able to drop these in and set the camera correctly, but it looks like I'm not going to be able to do that. Because if I hadn't changed the scale of this to 3.69 and just left it at 1, what we've got is a tiny set of set of sprites that are at that size, and I'm not totally sure whether that's what we want to do. The other alternative is that when we export from a sprite, so say if we just, I've split these frames out so I can get the individual bits. So the back plate's here on frame 5, so it's just got the things that I want on the back plate. You'll see there's loads of scruffy graphics that aren't finished in some of these things because they end up getting covered by other sprites. So let's have a look. So I could, of course, when I export this stuff, I could export it at a larger size so that when it comes into Unity, it occupies more of the total size of the frame, but I don't think there's any particular benefit to doing that. It means all the file sizes will be bigger. Not that they're going to be that big, they're small bits pixel art. But this is going to be a bit of trial and error, I think. I would ideally like to, when I create a new standard camera in any scene, I would ideally want to not change any of those settings so I can create multiple cameras and deal with that. But I might just be forced to make a little camera rig prefab that I use in all my scenes. My expectation is that at least one or two of these scenes might be wider than the viewport, the player's screen, so that when the character moves across it, the camera pans across the scene, which is again part of those classic LucasArts ones would do that when you got like a long scene, like in Monkey Island along the pier, things like that. So I want to be able to set up a camera that is going to consistently work. So that might just be, I do go with the actual 320 by 180 pixel art and pull the camera in really tight to that. But I'm just not totally sure how that's going to work. So we'll give it that a go. That's what we're gonna just settle in on, trying to work out whether we can leave all the pixel art at its default size, and then just have the camera be the thing that's altered to fit. So let me just delete these cameras. Let's start with a completely fresh camera that I know I haven't messed about with. Stick it in there and make sure it's set as the default camera. So if I click play now, you'll probably get nothing, I think. Yeah, completely great. And the reason for that actually isn't so much to do with the bounding box of the camera. You can see if I change the size thing, you can see that white bounding box. It's not that that's causing it. There is something else I must do. So we're working in Unity in the 2D mode because it's going to be a 2D game. But if I flick that to 3D mode, you'll see kind of what's happening. All the sprites end up getting layered on this 2D plane. And that camera is actually set at a Z depth, which is exactly the same as the plane with all the images on, which is why we're not seeing anything. So I just need to pull that back. We'll just put a nice round number. Again, you're going to see me doing lots of nice round numbers. I like things to be just so it's definitely not on the same level as that. And you can see that that is, if you like, I think it's called a view frustum, but it's what the camera can see and the vanishing point of that camera. Because it's an orthographic camera though, when you snap back to 2D. Click play. I don't know how far, it's not going to affect the zoom. It's not going to have zoomed out at all. But what we are seeing here is far too much of the Unity scene. If I click here, you'll see Chris's character come wandering in. So what I want to try and do is reframe onto this set of sprites just by changing the camera settings, I think, and then kind of saving a camera as the default camera for my game, I think, as a prefab. That's going to be the way to do it. So we're in play mode. hence the bright green. Let's just manually eye it for now and see what. Yeah, because there's a couple of weird things happening. I haven't repositioned this at all. This is at 0, 0, 0 and it's scale 1. And the sprite sort point, actually, let's just go back to the sprite editor. Oh, you can't do it in play mode. Let's stop it. So let's go to the sprite editor. The pivot is the center. I think that's going to be best in a minute. Let's stick that as center. It is right in the middle of the whole Unity scene. So why, question, is the camera that is also right in the middle of the Unity scene but just pulled back slightly? Why is it off center? So click play again. And see, it's higher than it should be, so I would expect that to be bang in the middle of the screen. So there's like a Y offset somewhere. So where is that offset coming from? The way Adventure Creator works from memory, this is the main camera in the Unity scene is the camera that's rendering, and this game camera that I've just created for my game, so it's not got a tick in it. I think all of the settings from this are basically pulled into the main camera because the main camera has got the main camera script on, and you can see it's attached this camera to it. So it could be that the main camera has got some setting in it that is causing this slight horizontal offset. I don't know. Not quite sure why it is. Let's see if we can fudge it for now, because there's nothing quite like a fudge on the very first days of starting something. So I know you can, yeah, these offsets here. Yeah, this is because you can set the camera to follow the player. So this, now it's dropped even lower down. I'm going to want to target the player at some point once I've got my own sprites in here, but we're going to be much closer zoomed into this. There is an offset here. I'll just turn that off for now so it doesn't target, because that offset could bring it central. But I don't like the fact I'm having to dial in an offset when I believe that it should. There's no way to do this when it's not in play mode, because you can't see the effect of that change. So let's do two things. Let's stick it in play mode. I know I've left an offset on that now. Not target the player. We'll work that out when we need to start targeting players. If I put an offset in it and then lock it, does it keep the offset? It does. Okay. So, round numbers, let's just put 2. See, now it's lower. That is so frustrating. I don't know why there's an arbitrary number for the offset. Let's eyeball it center. And then let's lock it so it doesn't move. And then let's pull in the actual orthographic size. It's off center horizontally as well, which is very strange because this is showing a 720 window. It's showing a 720 window, but it's way off. Oh, hang on a second, what happened there? Now it's really low. I think it's toying with me. So something's gone strange. I think this preview is part of the problem. So this game mode in Unity, oh, it's still following him, that's why. I haven't got it to follow. That's locked. How strange. Now I'm utterly confused. So it's been affected by the character somehow, this camera, and we don't want it doing that. That's just causing us more problems. I want to have like a fixed camera. Those retro games only ever followed when the character got to the edge of the screen, so I kind of want to maintain that, otherwise the pixel art will be moving about all the time. So we need to just remove any following actions, I think. That's going to be part of the problem. So I don't think the standard camera is the standard camera. It doesn't really have any other settings that it's not doing any of that. So we don't want it to target the player. I'll just get rid of all the follow speed. I'm not even sure if true camera moving steps as if snapping on a grid. Okay, we don't want to do that. Let's remove the offset, lock it, check that one. Okay. So that should be everything locked. It shouldn't be following everything. It's not following my cursor. So let's just make sure that that camera is the default camera that's being used. Check the main camera. There's nothing else on here that's following anything. Nope. Right. So that's all at 0, 0. That main camera is at a Y position of 1. Let's try again. Joy. It's now in the middle of the screen. Welcome to game development. This is the pain of game development. Right, okay. So yes, there was one thing slightly offset, so we've got that at least ironed out. I've got a feeling, yeah. So it was also moving. One of the other things was tracking that Chris's character sprite from the demo scene. But we should have that sorted now. So now we just need to actually lock in that camera zoom so that the pixel art's nice and crisp and that we get it in the middle. So we're going to do it in play mode so we can be absolutely sure, and then we're just going to copy the values back out again. All right. So yeah, lovely. So you can see now we are perfectly filling the screen, but annoyingly, because I like round numbers, 1.42 is annoyingly specific. If I just scale out, we want to make sure that this is at 1. Yeah, so these UI elements that are just part of the demo scene, they're kind of important. So we'll be updating all these to put them in like a retro style at some point. But whilst we're building the game, testing it and stuff like that, we're going to want these UI elements in there. It's like the inventory and things like that. Inventory item is going to go up there. We're going to want some menu things for saving and all of that. So we don't want to mess that up. But you can see that obviously the play canvas for the whole game is set to a resolution that is bigger than our artwork is coming in. And I mean, the easy thing to do is to scale up the artwork. But the problem with that, it's not being bilinear filtered, which is great because it means it keeps that retro style. It's not going blurry, but it would kind of mean me having to have all the artwork coming at this really weird arbitrary scale. So it might be the simplest way to do it, and it might be a decision I hugely regret later on. What we could do is we could just create a new empty game object, which is, we could call it pixel art holder or something like that. We could apply that rescaling to this, and then always drop our pixel art into there. Be one way to do it. Make sure that that's zeroed out, of course. And then we'll end up saving this as like a template for all of the scenes, and then we could always make sure we're dropping it into there. I know what's going to happen, like in like 2 months' time I'm going to completely regret doing this, but it would at least give me some consistency that I didn't have to dial in a random number at that point, and if they're all just parented to that, then that might be one way of doing it. So let's do that for now. Let's make a bold and probably silly decision. So let's stick everything in there. We can actually unparent all these, which might be helpful. So the back plate, the foreground, samples, and the desk, and I mean they're all stacked on top of each other. Unity displays top to bottom, but you use this ordering layer to move them up and down different layers. I've just realised, after having said it at the start of the stream, this is bright green. I've just done all of that. When I click stop, all of that's going to undo. So let's do it out of play mode. Let's just call this so let's call it pixel art holder. Let's apply the 1.56 or whatever it was. Stick all of this inside the pixel art holder. Unparent all of that. Make sure that's at 0, so we haven't got another offset getting in the way. And then what we want to do is apply that scaling to that. So I'm going to click play. I'm going to make sure we can see the whole UI, which we can. We can see all of that. I'm going to adapt it later. So we need this to be perfectly filling the screen, basically. So just make sure all of this stuff all got offset because I parented them after it. Egypt. Stick all of them back to 0. Not a great start, really. I messed that up. What have I done? Oh no, they were meant to be offset, the bottom two. Meant to be offset because they've got to be somewhere else in the room. That's where they're meant to sit in the room. So that's all fine. So long as the back plate and the foreground are not offset, this is the thing we're going to offset. We'll get there in the end, eh? Alright, so we want to apply that scaling to the pixel art holder to get that up to full full screen. I think what we'll do, just to be on the safe side, is we'll just nip a few pixels off and go for at least a decimal like that. So we're just going to lose a couple of edge pixels just to make sure we don't end up with a gap. So if I just pop back to A-Sprite a second, you'll see like here where this doormat is. There's like a corner pixel here in the doormat, and we've just lost the edges of that there in that. If I zoom in there. Oh, I can't actually yet. But yeah, you can see I've just nipped the edge off that. So I'm going to lose a couple of pixels around it, but I'm hoping that this is the right decision going forward. We'll find out at some point in the future when I watch this video back and go, why did I do that? Right, so we're going with 3.4. What I'm going to do, I could just remember that, but in this case, we can just copy this component, and then when you stop it, you can just go paste component values, and it'll put the 3.4 in there. So we've now got a much bigger scene. The reason that the demo one from Adventure Creator is wider is because when Chris has set that up, he's done that so that it can actually like drift across. Might be worth showing you actually. Let me just save this one. I shall open the actual 2D sample scene. Yeah, so I'll just show you how the demo scene works if you've not seen the Adventure Creator one. Worth having a look. So you can, those things that I was trying to just work out what was going wrong with. So you can see that the camera is following the character, and there's a nice little offset, and there's a nice little like slow movement towards it. It kind of speeds up and slows down, which is great for these kind of games, and that's how I've used it before. These kind of tools that are in Adventure Creator are really, really handy for that style. But when I'm wanting that really retro aesthetic, I don't want the camera moving. I don't want the fancy bells and whistles really that you've got. So I'm just going to strip out some of those things. But you can see the way that the character is actually, it kind of only occupies like this area of the screen, and when it gets to a bit, it kind of gets snapped back to middle, and the camera follows it around, which looks great. But it's not actually the effect that I want for this retro style. Yeah, this is a great demo. It's switching between cameras there as well. You'll see in the game camera thing, there's a nav cam and there's a sphere cam, so it does nice smooth transitions between the cameras. Really easy to set that stuff up as well. It is really, really powerful once you get using Adventure Creator. And there's kind of all the dialogue and text and little animations of the character and all that. These are all assets that come with it just for you to learn how to use it. You'll see when you finish that conversation, it'll then transition back to the gameplay camera. Really smooth, really great stuff. So yeah, it's all that stuff that I need to not have. So I'm using the demo scene just to remind me of how things are put together, and because it starts you off with a lot of stuff that is very useful. So I've literally dumped my graphics on top of this demo scene, and I'm just going to configure them round. I think as well, I think the thing that's adding confusion for me, it's the first time I've used Unity 6. I've been using one of the long-term support LTS ones for a couple of years now for the other game I'm making in Adventure Creator. So I'm also, not only am I just learned A-Sprite a week and a half ago, and my first visit back to pixel art in 25 or 30 years, I've got a slightly newer version of Adventure Creator that's got some new features, and I've got Unity 6, which never used before. So it's let's call it a smorgasbord of new stuff. So what I need to have a look at now get this scene loaded back up. And just move some of these other markers so I can just get used to again how these things work. So this is one of my other concerns had we have worked at a really small pixel scale. All of these gizmos, I know you can change the gizmo sizing here at like the Unity gizmos, like these triggers and the cameras and things like that. There's a setting up here that well aware of from my Unity days that changes the size of the gizmos. But some of those gizmos that are the adventure creator ones are obviously not bound by the same Unity scaling thing. And when I first dropped this artwork in just before I started this stream, I was like, ooh, I think I'm going to have to bring the artwork up to the size. Otherwise, we're going to end up with these massive gizmos and things. There's probably a way of changing them. And actually, the Adventure Creator forums, Chris in particular, who wrote Adventure Creator, is fantastic at providing feedback and has done for years for me on various games. There's so many features of it that he just knows like the back of his hand, where you think, oh, maybe I can change these, and yeah, you can. So you do it, and he's really great at that kind of support. So what we're going to do anyway is we're going to just do a couple of things to sort out a walkable area that feels like it's part of the my scene, a player start point, and a couple of other things that we'll see if we can just get moving, just to give me some confidence back in what's going on here. So we've got this is Chris's graphics in the background. So this is the room graphics, which is just a sprite, and this doorway mask, which from memory is actually just it's like a fake cover so that the character can look like he comes from behind the door. Loads of great little tricks like that when you're doing 2D games. So I'm just gonna hide Chris's graphics completely from there, whilst we just play with a couple of things here. So this trigger is just an example of a trigger, so we can forget about that for now. Just clicking these so you don't accidentally click them in when you're in the viewport. What I'm interested in is the nav mesh. So I think this has changed a bit since the last time I did it, but I assume we've just got a polygon collider. Yeah, we have, so you can just go edit poly collider and pull in these things, so we just get a walkable area that's within my scene. And I mean, this stuff, the first time I ever did this, it just absolute magic when if you've been into games since you were kind of my age, and you have these characters, Guybrush Threepwood and others that you saw when you were younger, walking around these scenes that felt 3D. When you learn the tricks of it, it blew my mind. Like maybe 10 years ago when I first started looking at game development as a hobby, this idea that this piece of 2D pixel art, this samples desk here I'm toggling on and off, it just gets positioned somewhere in the scene and another 2D sprite is allowed to go behind it. It just blew my mind. It was like, oh god, the stuff that they were doing back then that made it feel like these were real scenes. It seems so simple to look at it now, but it really is impressive. Right, so we're setting up the walkable area there. Walkable area, literally the bits you can click on that will cause the character to move, like the boundary to which he can walk. So the player start must be within that boundary, otherwise they get stuck outside it and can't walk. What I need to do is just test that out first of all. Also, this this shape here, this is something new I watched in a tutorial the other day, and this is a sorting map that helps scale the character, so it's bigger and smaller. Some of these percentage scales are further up the screen, again giving you that effect that the character's further back in a scene when they're actually just completely flat. So I need to understand that a little bit better because I've not really used that much. But I think you set these scale points for a position in the scene where they're at a particular scale. Don't think that we can undo that because these are the two important bits. So when the character's right here at the front, he's at 111% of his sprite size, which we're going to have to be really careful with this, I think, because our sprites are all going to be pixel art and we don't want it filtering. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Yeah, so it basically moves the sprite to a different order to set it behind other things. We'll just click play and have a look to see what's going on with that. Give me a better sense of what the settings are at the moment. So we've got something weird going on because we can't actually see the character anymore. Interesting. Let's have a look. So player start 2D. That is where he starts. A nav mesh. Is that nav mesh? That all seems to be fine. Sorting map. So for some reason the character is not appearing. I would expect him to have arrived right there. And we've got some Z fighting with that floating sphere by the looks of it. That's part of the scene behind it. That is strange. So I'm not totally sure why the player sprite has disappeared. All I believe I did, was move the player start. It's using the correct game camera. How strange. Don't believe I actually changed anything other than hiding the room scenes. There's no errors. And it actually is saying it spawned an instance of brain. He is there. Ah, he's behind. You can see his outline there. So he's getting spawned behind all of our other stuff. So we're going to have to I wonder how it's set up in the demo scene. This is why it's really useful, actually, like flicking between the demo scene and stuff. So is he either using like layer groups and putting it to a totally different sorting layer, or is he just using the order layer thing? Let's have a look at that. So it's sample scene. So if we run that, we'll see where it spawns in the player. So there's a sample player there. Close the audio source. Don't know if there is a layer option. So he's going on the ignore raycast layer, but the room, which is the background room, it's set to -10. I know mine's set at -5, but that doesn't affect anything. But you can see at some point there, as soon as you get to 0, yeah, so the player's at 0. So anything in front of 0 is sitting in front of the player. So yeah, so the player's sat at 0, which is why his demo, yeah, they've just got to be in front of the player. So player's at 0 when it spawns in. That's what we need to know. So if the player's at 0, we want to make sure that all of our pixel art is much lower than that. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do, just thinking ahead now, it's possible some scenes might be made up of maybe an absolute maximum of 10 things stacked on top of each other that I'll need space to shuffle them. So let's just always make our backplate -20 as the absolute furthest back that it might be. Let's just turn off those room graphics for a sec. So then the foreground, it still needs to be, well, it's actually going to be in front of the player, so it's got to be higher than 0. So we want to put that at 1, because that's going to be the first thing in front of the player, I guess. No, actually, let's put that at 10, giving us a load of gap for other stuff in between them as well. These are going to use, I guess, well, I'm not quite sure that's going to work actually. I think there's a new way to use the pivot point as the sorting bit for these items. So the things that you can walk behind, basically. So he's going to be able to walk behind that, and he's going to be able to walk behind that desk. So we're going to have to work that out when we get to it. At the moment, they are both higher than 0, so that's all we need to really worry about. So at the very least now, when I click play, I should see him. He shouldn't be behind the whole scene. There he is, but of course, made a mistake. The room graphics are still being shown. I'm hiding them here with the eyes, but you actually want to turn them off so that they're not rendered in play mode. There he is. Grand. So he should, as he is, be behind these things that are in the foreground, which is great. So you can kind of see that here, where he's behind that layer. But at the moment, he can go behind that, which looks great. But if I walk through it, basically by this point where his feet are in front of that, he should be in front of it. So I probably need to go and have a little look at Chris's tutorial of how you do that now. And then the other thing we need to fix is you can walk through it. So we're going to punch a hole in the nav mesh so that you can't click under that cabinet, and if you click beyond it, it doesn't let him walk through it. There'll be like a hole punched in there, and I do remember when I was on holiday last week watching a little bit of that tutorial for doing that now, because again it's slightly different to how I did it before. I'm going to quickly grab another drink and I'll be back in 2 minutes. Right, back. New glass of orange. Worth mentioning, like these, I think these kind of engines, Unity and big plugins like Adventure Creator, unless you're doing this full time, the reality of game development, especially as like a part-time evening game developer, no one can remember all of this stuff, and there's absolutely no shame in pulling up a tutorial, opening up YouTube and checking stuff, getting on the forums. The Adventure Creator forums are fantastic, actually. These Adventure Creator forum, we'll be spending a lot of time on this. They're really fantastic for getting like bugs sorted out, for just asking great questions. I think I've got 19 different discussions that went on there while I was doing Poly City Stories, and some of them requests for things that Chris, the developer of that, has then gone ahead and added as features, which have been fantastic. And almost always, there's an old one there, punching a hole in a mesh collider used as a nav mesh, and there's Chris, who, this was back in 2022. Anything, he basically gives you a nice simple solution, and it's a fantastic place for finding out all the things you need. But yeah, lots and lots of use of that last time, and I'm sure we'll be going back there again. What I want to look up now just quickly is the latest tutorial for that particular thing, which is putting a hole in a mesh. So I'm just going to grab the YouTube tutorial for that. When I'm craning my neck up there, I've got another monitor up there which has got all the stream stuff on it. So let's just add a 2D game tutorial. Can't find it now. Oh, there we go. 11 days ago. So here we go. Yeah, literally 2 weeks ago, Chris has put a whole hour-and-a-half new tutorial on there, because some of these go back many years. It's been around for a long while, Adventure Creator, but this is the latest one using Unity 6. So what I'm going to do is just pop that on. So somewhere along here we've got inventory, player characters, logic, saving, loading, translations. So it's going to be back here in creating 2D scenes. I can remember he pops a tree in this scene. So I'm just going to have a little listen to this as well. Alright, there you go. So there's something new in sorting maps. I assume it's already set like that in the demo. It must be. So in sorting map, affect character sort. Alright, no, it is on there, so we can uncheck that. I'm not quite sure why. This is bad of me watching tiny chunks of his tutorial, because it was very well explained when I watched it all when I was sat on a sun lounger in France the other week. But so I'm just going to dock this window up there so I can watch this at the same time. Okay, so I'm just watching the tutorial on the other monitor whilst I'm doing this. So yeah, I'll set this back on, otherwise it just looks like me strangely staring at the other end of my screen. So what he's doing in that particular tutorial at the moment is putting in a sprite, this tree, just like my little cabinet there, where you can then walk around it. So we're just going to follow this bit through. Alright, so yeah, we put the pivot point there. Alright, that's super handy, yeah. So like the actual sprite, in this case it's this little carpet samples thing. We're dealing with this at the moment, so we just need to make sure the pivot point is like at the bottom edge of this, where we'd want the character to walk in front of it. And Chris is just saying there that if it's not right in your actual sprite, then to go to the sprite settings and change the pivot. So actually you can do this now in the sprite editor. So Unity sprite editor, you can affect the pivot here, and you can set a custom pivot if you really wanted to. So custom, yeah, so you can see it's moving that pivot point on there. So you can set that pivot a little bit lower if you need to. We'll do that for now because it kind of sticks out a bit, this, and to make it a bit more realistic it'd want to be slightly lower than that bottom corner. So I'm just going to pop it there, apply that to the sprite, so we've got a more accurate pivot point. Let's continue. So right, so we need to do, so this is as we were just saying there, we need to set the Y value for let's just pull that back a bit. So oh, I thought I'd set this up as URP, but so we are. So let's select. I thought I'd set it up with the URP at the start. In fact, I am convinced before I even started this stream that I selected URP as the render pipeline. I'm gonna change to URP. I'm just worried what it might do is rebuild a load of shaders, but because I've not got many assets in there, I wouldn't have thought it would take a while. So no, it's done it immediately because there isn't anything built yet. So what we need to change according to that tutorial, I'm worried. I'm in Unity 6.2 and this is in 6.1, and I've got a feeling it might be slightly different. So in so here it is, the transparency sort mode. And what it's saying there is you need to change that to custom axis. So transparency sort. So what this meant to be doing is using Unity's inbuilt way of sorting layer order based on the Y axis. So this will be interesting. I hope it's going to work. I'm just going to slide that back off there. Let's full screen this again. Let's see if that actually does work. Sorry, I realise I keep moving about. I just caught a glimpse of the webcam there. So I'll try not to keep cutting my head off. Let's have a look then. Does that work now? So if the pivot point is automatically below that, will it automatically put the character behind that item when the character's pivot point is higher than it? That's effectively what we've just told Unity to do. So he's behind it to that point. If I bring him just below it, does he suddenly... No, I see, I would expect him to snap in front of that there, but he doesn't. So something's not correct there. Yeah, it's going to be back to the tutorial. As I said, no shame in not knowing what the hell you're doing and having to watch a tutorial about it. We're going to have to work out what's not correct here. Yeah, that's what should have happened, really. So, it's a shame that the scene that Chris has built in that video tutorial doesn't ship with the engine, unless it does. Let's have a look. 2D demo, scenes, and that's the old park one, that previous version. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not totally sure. It doesn't seem to have the kind of end scene, as in the all the stuff that happens in this tutorial is like an hour and a half worth of stuff. I don't think there's a file to download with the final thing in it. It's a shame, because I just wanted to see what settings were different. So it's this sample desk. I don't know whether when he brings in the tree, does he set a sorting layer for the tree? Let's go back to where the tree is first brought in. Yeah, so he doesn't change the order in layer setting, which I have been changing because that's the way I used to do this, to have things in the correct. Because I've got quite a few things in the scene that I'm going to need to sit. Yeah, so that's all the stuff we'd already looked at. Let's just get out of the way for a moment then. So let's just, for the sake of, let's put this to 0, which is the same layer that the player's on. Let's put this to 0. So long as that back plate, I mean, to be honest, if we put, let's actually just restack these so the back plate foreground's right at the front, because we always want, he's never going to go in front of that. These, if we just set them both to 0, our back plate we always want right at the back, so there's never any chance of him getting lost behind it. We've got the sorting map set. I think the top point of the sorting map needs to be above the top of the walkable area, the nav mesh, and equally the bottom one should be below it, so it covers the whole right the way across it. So if these are both on order in layer 0, they're on the same layer that the player arrives on when he spawns in. And then hopefully this layer sorting thing, Unity then works that out. So I have a feeling these were being pushed further forward. I was thinking about what he was saying there. So if I'm in front of it, perfect, yeah. So because he's lower down the screen than the pivot point of this, then he appears in front of it, right the way down to however far down here you can come. If he's higher than this pivot point, he'll appear behind it. So you can see if I just nudge him in there, he's just behind it. If he walks this way, he then snaps in front of it. So you get that effect. So what we want to do now is actually the next bit of that tutorial is stopping him from walking through it. So we want to get back to punching a hole in the nav mesh, so he will automatically walk around it and pathfind around it. And actually another nice thing that Chris has added recently, I think we've got a star pathfinding now, which is a method which is much faster, smoother at calculating those navigation things. Yeah, because that just looks a bit weird when he walks through it, so we're going to punch a hole so he walks around it. So let's do that bit next. Yeah, can I have a look at the tutorial again? So somewhere around exactly here where we were. Yeah, so Chris is explaining exactly the same thing there. You can walk through it, so adding a hole to a nav mesh. Oh right, I think that's new. We'll create a new. Alright, that's cool. Again, these are new things that didn't. So what he's suggesting is the best way to do this. So where we've got our samples here, I'm just going to call that cabinet for now. These are the. This was a bit of a test earlier on, really, getting stuff out of Sprite to here. So what we're going to do is create a new object, and let's call it cabinet hole. Actually, get used to a naming convention and stick with it. Cabinet underscore hole, hole underscore cabinet, and then all the holes, I can just search for hole and it'll show me any holes. Gonna move that so that it's kind of roughly in the middle of the polygon we're going to cut out of this. Parent it to the cabinet just for, so that this is neat basically, so we can just fold all of this away. So the hole in the cabinet, we then want to add a, I guess it's going to be a, I need to have a look at the tutorial, polygon collider I assume. Yep. So we're going to is trigger, because it is not actually a collider, we're not using physics, so we want to turn that is trigger so it doesn't use any physics for it. Edit the collider and then kind of pull this into a representation of the bit you'd want him to walk around. So you definitely want to leave some slack. And you can see between that white line and the screen, there's only a very thin bit for the character to walk through there. So I think, these kind of things happen mid-development when I then go, oh, maybe this needs to be further forward. But I think what we'll do, just so we can try this out and see if it works. I also learned last time that having really sharp corners on things, character can sometimes get a little stuck on them. So I recommend just rounding off some of those corners so that they're just a little bit smoother. So we don't want him to walk anywhere near that. That's going to be our hole. And then I'm just flicking back to the tutorial, which is why I'm staring up there again. Let's see how we actually punch that out of the... Yes. Right, that's really cool, that actually. So what you're doing there is the nav mesh has a new thing. It's got nav mesh holes, so you can create a new hole and then assign that hole to the nav mesh, which is really cool. Didn't used to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do before I do that is just edit my nav mesh slightly so that we've got a bit more room up there for him to walk. There is a padding setting and I can't remember where it is, but me putting that over the skirting board, I think he won't, we'll see. I don't think it'll let him walk on the skirting board because I think there's a bit of padding it uses, so you can give it a bit more room. So what we are going to do then is create this, so I'll finish editing that, create a hole, and then assign the cabinet hole into that hole. He doesn't click bake on the thing. No, he just clicks play. Moment of truth. Let's see. So he still walks in front of it, but if I click behind, actually, let's see if he walks over the skirting board. Oh, he does, yeah, so there isn't padding on there, so we need to bring that down a bit. But if I click diagonally across it, he shouldn't walk through the middle of it now. Perfect, yeah. And if I click over here, I see there was some issues there. Oh, something quite strange is happening there. So his feet are definitely higher than the bottom pivot of that, but he's rendering behind it. Oh no, that is correct, isn't it? So because we've got perspective here, we're going to have to think about this slightly differently, because we want him to be in front of it when he's down here, but behind it when he's over there. This is a bit of a tricky one. I think the pivot just needs to be much further up. It kind of needs to be in front of it. I don't actually know if that's possible. This poses a slight problem. Because of the angle of this and that perspective, if we're just using the front pivot of this to say whether he's front or back, when he's halfway up it, quite correctly, his feet are higher than the pivot of this, so it's setting him behind it, but that obviously doesn't look right. But if we put the pivot up here, he would be in front of it, but then when he's over here, it would still be in front of it, which would look wrong. So I'm not totally sure how to do that. Not totally sure. That's going to be a fun one to work out. But it's definitely the hole's working. We just need to work out how we get him to walk in front of it. I wonder if we just stop him from walking anywhere near it. So we just put a bigger hole to avoid that issue. Yeah, I think that's a creative way to solve it. There's probably a really clever way. I'll stick something on the forum and ask about that, because that's quite an interesting conundrum. So the hole, what I'm going to do, I assume, even though it's been parented now, we're going to make the hole even bigger so the character never walks too close to it. I mean, the problem is this little thing here is a tape measure, and there's some sample books and things, and they're kind of integral to some of the puzzles that are going to be coming up. So I wanted a character to be able to stand next to it and pick that up. So we're just going to have to be creative about it. This is often how it is with a 2D game. You've got to kind of fudge the way that the perspective and everything's working. So I'll probably have to have the character, when it comes to picking this thing up, walk to a point here where I know he's going to be in front of it, turn and face with his back to the camera, and then do a bend to pick up. Whereas in actual fact, we make sure that his feet have come past it so that he renders in front of it. But I think that hole, that should be fine. I wanted to also go back to the nav mesh and bring this off the skirting board, because there isn't the padding that I thought there was. So I'm just going to do that. So he's still got a bit of room up there. You can see that there needs to be a channel big enough for the character to move through there. So that is a big hole, but I think that's going to solve the problem. I'm just going to extend that way as well, so he doesn't come crashing through. Let's give that a go. See if that gives the illusion that that thing is actually there. Apart from the fact he comes smashing through the door as well, obviously that's a problem, but I know exactly what that is. Chris set up like a little walk to at the start. He was hiding him, so he looked like he was coming through a door. We haven't done that yet. So I'm going to click right away over here. Still some... So, yeah, so you still get a bit too close to it. That's interesting. Let's just look at the gizmos. I would say there. He is stood inside that hole. Let's just hide. Let's just hide some of the Unity icons. So get rid of that. Get rid of the camera node. Oh, it isn't camera node, is it? Camera, I think. Just have a quick look. Camera. Nope. Yeah. So that pivot point, which is the player's pivot point. Where are we? It's down here, sample player. Yeah, his pivot point, which is right there. It is bang centre there. If I go back to the nav mesh or the hole, he's inside the hole. he shouldn't be allowed inside the hole. I'm not quite sure how that has happened. Go back to the game view. Turn the gizmos off. Let's leave them on. So you can see the pathfinding there, the blue raycast. And you can see there how it goes around the corners. But he's doing something very weird. So he's working his way around. That raycast's working. He's going around the edge. But he still crosses through it. I think we just have to make the hole even bigger to stop that clipping through. I assume you can't do it in play mode because it's punched out the nav mesh. Let's find out, shall we? Be really clever if you could. No, because you can't edit the colliders while you're in play mode. No. Right, let's just make the hole massive and see what happens. Massive hole. Much bigger than we think we need to. So he avoids all of that. And if he cuts across, he shouldn't go in front of it. Give it another bash. Trial and error. So, huge hole now. Hide the gizmos. See if the effect looks right. So he went round it there. I mean, it kind of looks right. He goes behind it. He won't go diagonally through it. He kind of just nips off that corner, but... And obviously this isn't the game sprite that I'll be using. This is just the one from the demo, but... I mean, that's giving you the right effect, but my main concern is that, like, I can't say I wanted to pick up this book. I'll be able to set a point that he walks to, but I now know for sure that if his feet are higher than the pivot of this case, then he's going to render behind it. So if he stood here, which is just like a little bit higher than the bottom corner of this, is going to render behind it, and that's no good really for... So temporary fix looks alright, but I need to maybe put a question on the forum about that, and maybe I'll submit a little bit of this video. Okay, we'll probably move on to something else. Let's punch a hole for this and get him walking behind the desk. Let's do that now that we know how to do it. So we're going to create, using our naming convention, hole desk. We'll parent to that. We'll create polygon collider. We'll make it a trigger. And we will actually what we didn't do, move that roughly to the center of the object, then edit the collider, learn from our last mistake, make the hole much bigger than you expect to, so you can't walk through it. Actually, you can see we've gone outside the nav mesh there. So we can stop here. We're going to have a door. I'm going to draw a door there on that wall so that you can leave. That sphere is not mine either. So we're maybe going to need to make the hole something like that and just extend the nav mesh a bit, because we're going to want him to be able to walk out of that door. So hole desk, we don't want him to walk that way. I wonder if you can. I wonder if you can do that, because we never want him to like nip up this little gap. We always want him to walk. If he stood here, we want him to walk all the way around to get on the back, and vice versa. So let's see. Let's see if that punches a hole properly. So we're going to create a new hole. Assign that polygon collider. We then need to set the desk. Make sure the pivot's in the right place for that. So the sprite sort point. By default, they come in at center, which is obviously not correct. So they need to be pivot. And I think just in the sprite editor, we customized this before, but it looks fine. You're never going to be at this corner. That is set to bottom center, which I think is absolutely spot on. That should be fine. We learned earlier on that these were meant to be at 0, the same as the character. So let's click play. Let's see if that hole is punched correctly. Hide the gizmos. Yeah, he's ended up in that one position where his foot's in front of it and his hand's behind it. So we'll probably need to make that even bigger, that hole, really. I mean, I'm not going to be using this sprite, so my sprite will be fatter, thinner, something will be weird about it. Oh, actually, hang on. Oh yeah, it's respecting that. It just did something weird. If we go behind there, yeah, it goes behind the counter. But look, he nips around the side. Shouldn't be allowed to do that. So what we're going to have to do in this case, I think rather than using a hole, because it's obviously not correctly like punching out this, I think what we'll do instead of using a hole, let's get rid of the desk hole, go back to the nav mesh and get rid of that. So it has only got one hole, and actually what we're going to do is we're going to edit the nav mesh. Yeah, so go to nav mesh, go to edit, and let's just make some new points here, and we don't want him to ever go around the side. So by making the nav mesh such that he can never go up round the side here, it'll also make it a bit easier for us to make a doorway, I think. So let's just round that off like I suggested, so we've not got too many sharp edges. And I'm actually, now that I know there isn't any buffer, just going to pull all these right down to the bottom of the screen. I wonder if you go below. Let's try it out. Because I want him to be able to come quite close to these things. Let's see what happens with that below bit. I'll put this there just so we can see the difference. Just beyond that plant. So I think that'll solve the problem. He can get right in behind the desk now, but he'll never come round the side. So I can get him behind the desk. If I click here, yeah, you can get close at the desk. But no, alas. So when I click there, he is going round. When I click here, he is going round. Yeah, we've got the same issue again. We just need to make an even bigger hole, because when he stood here, he is rendering behind this. He's going to render behind it until his foot goes beyond the bottom corner of here. And maybe that's not actually what we want to do. We want him to start rendering in front of it from this corner. So let's just tweak that desk. Let's just edit the pivot. And let's just do it manually, so instead of bottom center, let's set it to custom. And let's bring it up. I don't think it matters the X, but let's just do it for giggles. So what we're basically saying is he renders behind that when he's above that point, and he renders in front of it when he's below that point. So that corner should give us a better effect there. Oh great. Is the physical pivot as well. Alright, so we just need to good to know. Slide that back into place. Doesn't have to be exact, to be honest. Just you can see all my scrappy artwork behind it that I didn't finish off. So let's just move that nav mesh a bit. We don't want, because we know there isn't much of a buffer, if any. We have to avoid walking up there. Let's give him a load more room behind the desk. But realistically, he wouldn't be able to walk there because the desk pops out a bit. Let's give that a go. So hopefully that pivot in the corner gives him a much better place to render. So if he stood here, yeah, he's in front of it. When he stood at the corner of the desk, that all looks good. He comes down here, he can't go higher than it. If you click round, he goes all the way around the back. If I click there, yeah, it's not clickable, that's fine. That's good for me. Yeah. There's always that little bit as they walk past something, but that was, again, once we get to the retro style of all of this, it's exactly how things like Monkey Island worked. You got that clip as you went past stuff, or you got really broad holes that they couldn't walk, areas they couldn't walk in, like we've done with this one. And you can obsess about these things when someone's playing the game. They're more often looking at the thing they're walking to. It's like, oh, I'm going to walk over here and pick that up, and then that's the thing that they end up clicking on. Yeah, because the mouse pointer is constrained to the play area. It's not possible to click below it to make him walk lower. It does seem like there's a, excuse me, tired. Does seem like there's quite a big gap. So there's the bottom of his thing. Right, so this sphere must be being used as some kind of collider, is it? Hotspot detector. That's a box collider. Oh, that's the hotspot for him. Shadows separate. Has he got a collider on there? Oh no, that's actually the sound thing, yeah. Yeah, that's the audio source. It's the fall off of the audio source, I believe. So I wonder why he doesn't come further down the screen. Because the nav mesh is letting him, but he's not coming any lower. He's coming a bit lower now. How strange. Click up there. And click right on the bottom. When he stops a bit early. Click again and he comes a bit closer. How weird. Interesting. Well, we've achieved quite a bit there. I've got my head back around some of these systems, and in particular these are new systems that are using the Unity's like Y sorting on the renderer to do these kind of effects when they go behind and in front of things, which is actually really cool. The new way of doing that seems really good, a lot better than it used to be. Cool. Well, it is 20 to 1 in the morning. So that, I guess, has been my first ever stream of this kind of thing. The uh, the development of this will just continue in the spare time I've got. I will try and do more streams, and I will try and cut some of these things together into smaller YouTube chunks on particular sections, or maybe even once I'm working out some of this new stuff, record some specific tutorials for some of these things as well. But hopefully there'll be some nights where we're not in Unity, where we're just spending our time in Sprite, actually doing some pixel art, which all of these are hand-drawn pixel art. I've got quite a few other scenes to make. I've also got the setup of the story, and I've been using a variety of tools for writing the story, and I use FigJam as well for plotting out the puzzles and putting like flow charts and puzzle dependency charts together on those kind of things as well. But the focus this time for this game is it's going to be classic retro style. It's going to be really small. The scope of the game is going to be really small so that I actually get it done. So it'll end up probably being something that takes 9 to 12 months to make, and probably takes somebody about an hour and a half to play. But that is the reality of this kind of development, when there's one person doing everything. But we'll be dealing with the animation once we've got all the graphics done. So the character animation as well, walk cycles, actual character sprites. We'll be dealing with audio, both music. I'd like to get some kind of retro music in there. Dealing with possibly dialogue voiceover, but I am kind of keen to do it all as text. The original Monkey Island and the first release of Monkey Island 2 weren't talky versions, as they called them, but then they later got voice acting put on top of them. If I do decide to go that way somewhere down the line, I'll be using 11 Labs, I would have thought, so AI generated voiceover, because I'm a terrible actor, and I think to get the character fullness of the characters that are going to be in this, that would probably work quite well, but we'll see when we get to it. For my other point and click game that's out on Steam in early access, the Polycity Stories, that was a hired voice actor, and he's absolutely fantastic. I wouldn't have done it, or I wouldn't have been able to do it any other way, because there wasn't AI voiceovers at that time that I built that game. But nothing really replaces a really good voice actor, but unfortunately they cost quite a bit of money, because they've got their own home studios, they've got a lot of kit, and this guy in particular had an absolutely fantastic voice. You should go and check out the trailers for Polycity Stories, actually, and you'll hear his voice on them. He was great to work with as well, but this game, I'm seeing if I can kind of do everything myself, and some of that is potentially going to be using some of them, like AI music, maybe AI voice. I don't want to do any of the graphics with AI, but certainly mock-ups and concept stuff is really, really helpful to get AI to give you some ideas for layouts of these rooms, or just give you some creative like juice to get like something else done yourself. So we'll revisit all of those kind of things as we go through this, and hopefully each night that I'm streaming, or I get round to streaming, there'll be something different happening, and over time hope to see a few people joining along, and then following the videos on my YouTube channel, which has got a few hundred subscribers, and a lot of people who looked at the Visionaire stuff that'll maybe start picking up the stream and coming along to live streams, or at least commenting on the edits of these once they go live on YouTube. So yeah, if you're watching this back after the live stream, then cheers for watching, cheers for supporting. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, because that really matters, does make a difference. And yeah, hope to see you on the next one. So thanks very much.